Many say we've been lied to, that the ancient history of North America, the story of whom lived here before us, has been hidden. That tucked away at the Smithsonian or university storage room is an inconvenient and uncomfortable truth. That North America was in fact discovered way earlier than we'd been taught. And those people were not simple nomads crossing the Bering Strait. These were people that aligned structures they'd built to solstices and equinoxes from the heavens, and created artifacts that tell the story of an advanced culture. From a cave in the Grand Canyon containing mummies and writing that looks Egyptian, to a large rock in Kentucky with a petroglyph of Ra, the Egyptian sun god. Mummies found in Mammoth Cave, Kentucky that are documented and cataloged. Documentation from Indiana geological surveys from over 100 years ago that tell similar stories of stone tombs and ancient bodies. Various mummies found in Indiana quarries for over 200 years, and as late as 2015. And legends from old-timers passed down for generations that a cave in southern Indiana is filled with ancient mummies. This is the story of a lost world, one we never knew. To be clear, the story of ancient America is not a simple one. Many different groups arrived at different times by bold exploration or rough seas that took them off course. Not everyone that came documented their trip, and the ones that did wrote on things that could not last the test of time. Or that documentation was simply lost to the ocean when their sailing vessels sank beneath the waves. They were lucky enough to make it here, but not lucky enough to make it back home. But the few evidences that are left bring us to a serious pause. There are stories about mummies all across North America, leading many to believe that ancient Egyptians, experts in mummification, reached the continent in antiquity. One of the more intriguing legends was reported about the Grand Canyon in 1909. The Arizona Gazette ran a story about G.E. Kincaid, an explorer traveling the Colorado River. Along his journey, he spotted a cave high above the basin. It was about 2,000 feet above the river. He decided to leave his boat, climb, and investigate the cave. About 100 feet from the entrance, he found carved chambers that were not naturally occurring. On the walls were what looked like Egyptian hieroglyphics. And on large shelves, he found mummies wrapped in clay and bark fabric. All of them appeared to be men. There were statues that looked part Egyptian but also Oriental. He found a variety of cups and vases made of both gold and copper. From this expedition, he sent artifacts to the Smithsonian for analysis, and that was the end of that. The Smithsonian has no record of these artifacts, nor of any explorer by the name of G.E. Kincaid. He simply vanished from history after the newspaper report of 1909. the story has largely been dismissed as a hoax and discredited. But people that have traced the river to this cave are intercepted by military personnel every single time. Is it because it's near the US military's Yuma Proving Grounds? Or because there's a complicated history that needs to be hidden? Some have speculated that the military base was made there because of the cave and what was found inside. But not all mummies found in America were as easy to dismiss. Mammoth Cave in Kentucky provided undeniable proof. From 1811 to 1935, a total of 6 mummies were discovered. They did not fit the profile of simple hunter-gatherers. Unlike other stories that were easily dismissed, these mummies were so well documented and even photographed that they left no room for debate. Ranging from around 2,400 to over 4,000 years old, these mummies exhibited many strange attributes, such as woven clothing, cosmetics, and even a stone burial chamber. The most peculiar was a female mummy found within a stone tomb, sitting upright. Not only was she embalmed like the Egyptians, she was also wearing what looked like lipstick. She had short red hair and was at least 6 feet tall. She was enclosed in a woven shroud and seemed to be a person of great importance, certainly of great importance to archaeology. In 1815, the mummy was removed and displayed at Lexington, Kentucky. In 1816, the mummy was sent to the American Antiquarian Society at Worcester, Massachusetts. In 1876, it was displayed at the Centennial International Exhibition in Philadelphia. In 1893, at the World's Columbian Exposition in Chicago. Not only did the mummy get a lot of mileage, it was seen by thousands of people, and at some point, a picture was taken before heading to the Smithsonian. However, the current whereabouts of this mummy are unknown. It is nowhere in the Smithsonian catalog and is lost to history. This only adds to the mythos of whatever goes to the Smithsonian disappears at the Smithsonian. But the 5 other mummies are still safe and hidden deep inside Mammoth Cave. As you might imagine, suggesting that ancient Egyptians made it to North America is just asking for rebuttal. After all, where is the proof? Some people say that proof starts at Manchester, Kentucky. At Rawlings Stinson Park, sitting alone under an enclosure is a huge piece of rock, now known as the Redbird petroglyphs. It was once attached to a sandstone cliff along Redbird River, but in 1994, this 50-ton rock fell onto Kentucky Route 66. Thankfully, no one was hurt, but it couldn't stay in the road. 20 feet long and 5.5 feet tall, it has all kinds of mysterious, chiseled symbols on its surface. Some are thought to be Native American, but others are definitely not. Their origins are from somewhere else, very distant. There are at least 8 extinct Old World languages. These were all dead languages before Christopher Columbus was even born. One in particular appears to show the Egyptian sun god Ra. While impossible to attach dates or an author, it conjures up images of pharaohs sending ships across the ocean to look for new lands. While highly controversial, it's listed by the Smithsonian as Artifact 15CY51. There are many theories, but no consensus. But it's just one of many petroglyphs that make us question the true history of North America. There's a cave at Manchester that also exhibits these ancient languages. There are ancient petroglyphs at Paineville, Kentucky on private land, and many others throughout the region. Combined with stories from Illinois and Missouri that speak of Egyptian artifacts and mummies, the mystery only deepens. Is this proof of ancient Egyptian exploration, or simply a people with very similar customs? Standing in the balance were strange findings in Indiana. When I first moved to southern Indiana back in 2009, I met a man that hunted for arrowheads. He said the secret to finding anything was to wait for a huge Ohio River flood. After the water went down, get in a boat and you'd find something. You just had to look along the muddy riverbank and be patient. With thousands of years of history, all it took was water to wash away the past. Over a span of more than 40 years, he and his brother had found a large number of arrowheads, including one of the finest spearheads he had ever seen. He said that others had found even more ancient items. Universities were contacted. They rushed in, collected the artifacts, and neither they or these items were ever seen again. This led many people to keep things to themselves. On one occasion, as their boat skimmed along the Ohio River shoreline, this man and his brother, both teenagers, saw bones sticking out of the riverbank. It didn't take a degree to know they were ancient. He and his brother took the skull and bones home. They put them in a box in their parents' basement. Over time, they graduated high school, went to college, married girls from Louisville, had kids, and retired without ever thinking about the bones at mom and dad's house. That was until 50 plus years later. His father had passed away, and his mother had met a nice man at church. They planned to get married, sell the house, and live together in their golden years, so started packing up the basement. One afternoon, his mother called him with a distressed voice. "Do you know anything about a skeleton in my basement?" He told her it was nothing, just something they'd found as kids. Unsurprisingly, she insisted he come and get it immediately. So he and his brother, both of them now grandparents, took the box of bones back to where they found them. They walked up the riverbank and reburied the skeleton. Hopefully, this would buy this ancient person a few hundred years of peace. But their discovery was not unique. People had been finding skeletons in stone tombs for well over 200 years. In fact, hundreds of skeletons were found along the shoreline as people built homes and businesses. Apparently, this area was a large burial ground and had been for thousands of years. Most intriguing were what some called the tombs of kings. These were burial chambers made of stone, and the skeletons were placed in a sitting position, just like the mummy at Mammoth Cave. Some of these were described as giants, but none of these specimens can be verified today. While many strange things were reported as early as the 1700s, it wasn't until 1837 that Indiana did something about it. By an act of legislature, formal studies began. These reports are the stuff of legends. In 1837, David Dale Owen of New Harmony was hired to survey Indiana's geology and prehistory. Born at Scotland in 1807, he was a genius, a polymath. Educated in Switzerland, Glasgow, Scotland, and London, England, he studied the natural sciences, geology, and chemistry. He had a voracious appetite for knowledge, especially the unusual and the ancient. In 1835, he earned a medical degree at Cincinnati, Ohio, but his true passion was the natural sciences and the strange things found across America under our feet. In his lifetime, he conducted geological surveys in Iowa, Wisconsin, Missouri, Minnesota, Illinois, Arkansas, Kentucky, Illinois, and Indiana. He was an epic explorer and collected a huge amount of fossils, artifacts, and skeletal remains. In 1846, he not only helped design the Smithsonian, but chose the quarry for its stone. He was also on the Smithsonian Board of Regents and very important to its founding. In fact, he and his brother Robert helped secure federal funding for its operation. Funding that's continued for nearly 180 years. And throughout his adventures, he collected odd, ancient artifacts. These were stored at a large museum and laboratory at New Harmony, Indiana. His collection was so large that it was stored at the Harmonist Community House No. 1 and also a former shoe factory. Growing in size, it was moved to a large former granary. It literally stored tons of ancient items, a warehouse full of curiosities. It was said to be the finest collection west of the Alleghenies, with well over 85,000 items in its inventory. After the Smithsonian was built, David sent the bulk of these specimens from New Harmony to Washington, D.C., 18 crates in all. But today, the Smithsonian has no record of these artifacts, not a single one. They too have been lost to history. How do you lose a warehouse full of artifacts? But David Dale Owen did not put all of his eggs in one basket. He kept some of the artifacts in New Harmony. He knew how important they were. Against his doctor's orders to rest, he instead dictated his final reports to an assistant, desperately wanting the world to know all that he'd discovered. He'd also built a museum to display these curiosities at New Harmony, but he didn't get to use it. In 1860, at only 53 years old, David Dale Owen passed away. He literally worked himself to death, trying to share his immense knowledge. His family still owns the museum where he'd hoped to share a lifetime of extraordinary findings. They sold these artifacts to Indiana University at Bloomington. They became an important part of their catalog. Unbelievably, in 1883, a massive fire ripped through the building where they were stored. It was said that the entire David Dale Owen collection was destroyed. A random loss or lost on purpose, there is no telling what disappeared between the university fire and the 18 crates sent to the Smithsonian. But David Owen created something much harder to erase. First calling it a geological reconnaissance, it would later become the Indiana Geological Report. Printed in high volume, these reports are located in universities across America. These would become the basis for some of the most amazing prehistoric discoveries Indiana had ever known. From the very beginning of European exploration and pioneer settlement of Indiana, strange things were found in the wilderness, but not formally documented. From abandoned ancient cities to burial mounds with mummified bodies and unusual jewelry, stories spread of an ancient advanced people that existed well before the Indians. The Indians themselves didn't know who built these structures and gave them special reverence. But for those that had never seen an ancient tomb or mummy, it was just a good campfire story. With the 1869 hiring of Indiana State geologist Edward Travers Cox, things were about to get weird. He expanded the geology report, describing prehistoric creations by an unknown people. There were earthworks that were built to track equinoxes and solstices, stone walls enclosing ruins of ancient villages, which he called stone forts. At Charlestown, there were remnants of what was considered a castle. Its most impressive feature were walls over 75 feet tall. Near DuPont, Indiana, there were prehistoric stone walls, hundreds of feet long, in the woods. He surveyed Wyandotte Cave in Harrison County, detailing not only its abundance of saltpeter, gypsum, and epsonite, but the ancient people that mined chert deep within its interior. He described hundreds of ancient bodies found at Vincennes. Some of his artifacts went to the Working Men's Institute at New Harmony. But what's here are not mummies or proof of ancient civilizations. We find minerals, fossils, and skeletons of animals. In fact, very little is here from Edward's lifetime of exploration. Part of his collection was sent to Indianapolis and stored at the State House, first in a small room upstairs, then the basement. The museum then moved to Alabama Street in downtown Indianapolis, and later along White River at the current Indiana State Museum. However, Nothing from Edward's collection about mummies or ancient cultures is anywhere in their catalog. It's said that he sent important artifacts to the Smithsonian, but as you might have guessed, neither the artifacts or Edward are mentioned in their catalog. On his many surveys of Indiana, Edward brought with him another legend, Professor William Borden. William was an expert on fossils, minerals, and paleontology. Having discovered a silver mine out west, he had become wealthy and could devote full time to his passions. He created his own university, patterned after Harvard. In 1900, he built his own museum at New Providence, Indiana, and filled it with the exceptional things he found in Indiana. This museum was visited by members of the Smithsonian. He even sent them many artifacts in his lifetime. In fact, he even had receipts of these items on Smithsonian letterhead. But just like other stories of things sent to the Smithsonian, nothing from the Borden collection is registered in their catalog. In 1879, John Collette became the state geologist. Born in Vermilion County, he was a lifelong bachelor, wealthy, 6 foot 2 inches tall, and passionate about geology, paleontology, and archaeology. He was a force to be reckoned with, and his ancient discoveries were nothing short of incredible. John Collette was a friend of Edward Cox and had helped him map Wyandotte Cave. Mapping was actually his specialty, and he produced the first geological map of Indiana. Just like Edward Cox, William Borden, and David Owen before him, he had a strong interest in ancient history, and Indiana delivered. He found well-preserved mastodons in Indiana's peat bogs. They were so well preserved that workers cracked open the bones and used the marrow to shine their boots. In Brown County, at the top of Browning Mountain, he described what looked like ruins of an ancient temple. And in Lawrence County, at Old Palestine, he found an exceptional tomb built of flagstone. Inside were ancient bodies, jewelry, and weapons of war. Although the site was well documented in its time, saying the bodies and artifacts were sent to the State Museum, none are registered in the State Museum catalog. During his tenure, John was directed to stone quarries across the state, where mummies were being found buried under tons of rock. In many instances, he provided his own money to support excavation and what he thought was important fieldwork. It was unclear why mummies were being found in rock quarries. At one time, many were on display at county courthouses, at county fairs, and county museums, but strangely, they disappeared and are unaccounted for today. When John Collette died in 1899 at 71 years old, it ended the classical period of early Indiana archaeology. He left a legacy of wonder in his writings for future explorers to digest, and I, for one, was right behind him, with many questions of my own. Ever since I moved to southern Indiana, I'd heard strange stories about mummies in caves. Old-timers claiming they'd found remnants of an ancient civilization. Given that there are thousands of caves in southern Indiana, and some of these go underground for miles, mummies could be anywhere. Or it could be just a legend and nowhere at all. I'd largely dismissed it as folklore. That was until I heard about a hidden place in Crawford County. It was a very rugged trail with some of the tallest cliffs in Indiana and numerous caves. And to add to the mystery, prehistoric human remains had been found in a cave. The location was ancient. Here was a rare Indiana arch. Like a cathedral in the wilderness, a holy place. Many people are immune to such things, and usually I'm one of them. But not here. This was a special place to a people long ago, and perhaps it still was. Hidden underneath was a secret passage where two brothers found a cave entrance filled with dirt. Having dug into this cavity, they found 3 ancient bodies. The university was called. Archaeologists came in, removed the remains, and took them to a lab. They were estimated to be hundreds of years old, if not older. A very vague answer. And then, all record of them were gone. Just like every piece of evidence ever shared with authorities, no one knows where the bodies went. It should be no surprise that local people have no interest in sharing with universities and esteemed places like the Smithsonian. They found things they didn't understand, reached out for answers, but received nothing in return. I know of a hunter that found a cave filled with pottery shards and beads on the floor, but after a university came to another site, took everything and told residents they had no right to be there, he chose to keep the location a secret. And it probably always will be. But that hasn't stopped findings in other places. In 2015, at the Singleton Quarry in Lake County, a mummy was found under tons of rock. University studies were conducted, and it was deemed prehistoric, between 500 to 2,000 years old. And then, the mummy was reburied at an unknown location. Many others were found in quarries across Indiana for over 100 years, begging the question of why. As I took in all the facts, it occurred to me, I'd seen large amounts of piled up stone other places in Indiana besides quarries, and it was all underground. In many caves, you'll see what's called breakdown. This is when a cave, once filled with water, drains. The unsupported stone above then crashes to the cave floor. But what if ancient people took advantage of these loose stones and buried their leaders under these piles of rock? And later explorers never gave them a second thought. Could it be that somewhere, inside a cave, underneath a pile of rock, is a hidden chamber? One that leads to all the answers we seek. To be clear, not all mummies are Egyptian. In fact, some mummies are naturally occurring, cured by ultra-dry air or saturated by minerals. But when they have been found, it creates a question mark. Do we truly know it all? And what should we make of it? Do universities and the Smithsonian have a reason to hide evidence, things that might rewrite history as we've known it? Why do important artifacts continue to disappear? Is it rumor, bad record keeping, or completely on purpose? Is it a fear of losing their esteemed reputation? A fear of losing government funding? Or is it both? Researchers far greater than I have scoured North America looking for proof of ancient origins and trying to uncover the veil of legends. Despite their best efforts, so much is still a mystery. Truly, a legend is a legend until irrefutable evidence is discovered. I'm certain that long after I've taken my last breath, there will still be amazing, unsolved mysteries for others to chase. But as I close my eyes at the end of the day, I can only wonder, what mysteries were hidden right in front of me?